Well, good morning, everybody. This is a little bit of a different crowd for me, so I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is Tim Mangan. My company is Immersion Technologies, which consists of myself and my wife. And as of yesterday, my daughter is back working for us again. So there's three of us. I focus on the Microsoft AppV technology, which is really my background. And it's sort of funny. I'd never heard about this conference until I started doing some trainings out at PDS. And Kurt said, "Oh yeah, we run this event every year, and we'd like you to come and speak at that event." And I started looking into it, and I sort of felt like the last 18 years have been leading me to be right here. So I thought I'd take you a little bit on that journey to start with. First of all, yes, there are evaluations, so please do that, and please follow the instructions very carefully, okay? Okay, so my last 18 years in shirts kind of go like this. I started in 1999 at a small company called Software Wow. And we didn't really know what to call what we were doing at that point, but today we'd use the terms that we were the first app store in the cloud. So this is 9 years before Apple had their app store. We didn't really have the term cloud yet, but that's really what we were doing. We were taking standard off-the-shelf software, mostly games, and we had a couple of data centers, and we were streaming them to consumer PCs where they would run those games without having them installed. And it was a fantastic idea, this streaming technology, which is really where I came to the company. My background had been in the communications industry, so I was really great with protocols and the like. It was some good technology, but unfortunately it was based on the idea that we'd have these little banner ads being displayed there, and that's where we would earn our revenue. People wouldn't pay for those games. Well, when the revenue for those banner ads went away, we suddenly needed to find something else to do. So we did what any good startup would do. We went out and raised a bunch of money, and then we rebranded ourselves from Software Wow to Softricity. This was based in Boston, and at Softricity, I ran the development organization there. We built the SoftGrid platform, which is now what's known as Microsoft AppV. Along the way, I became a Microsoft MVP and a Citrix CTP because most of my customers are also using Citrix as well, and I've gotten very into that technology. And then, of course, today I have my own company, Immersion, which is primarily doing trainings around the AppV technology. I do a little bit of consulting on the side from time to time as well, but mostly in the US. Right now, there seems to be a tremendous appetite for the training here in Europe, which has really surprised me. I've traditionally done that training in the US. Sorry about that. So one of the things I talk about is the application lifecycle, and what every enterprise goes through, whether they're dealing with a migration of some type or they're dealing with those one-off requests that come in every month. Oh, we need this other new application or a new version of it. And everyone has a process that's kind of like this. And what I'm going to be doing is focusing, oh, I do have one of these, yep, on the center section here about assessing that software and getting it processed and ready to go out. I shouldn't have used that. Now my clicker doesn't work. Okay, so there is some software out there that will help you with that assessment. We have some tools here on the left side that really work, as I refer to it, as a pre-assessment. So you can take a look, they'll look at the installer and investigate that installer, and they'll provide you some information about that. And may or may not be helpful with that. And quite frankly, I think the technician who's busy, who has the job of getting that application prepared, probably gets less value out of these tools than someone who's like the project manager that wants to kind of manage who's going to work on what. The big thing with Citrix App DNA is to give you that red, orange, and red light to tell you how likely is this application going to work in the environment that you want to put it in. I find that information completely inaccurate, but it makes a nice color chart so the project manager can say, oh my goodness, I need more resources. Okay, so it does have some value. But what I've been focusing in is the post-assessment. And the reason that I do that is that these installers have so many little hidden things that you can't see in the pre-assessment. So I like to get everything put down and captured and take a look at those results to understand the application and what it's trying to do and what it's trying to integrate with. I break those integrations into 4 categories. The application interfaces with the operating system. It interfaces with the end users through things like shortcuts and file associations and the like. It interfaces with other applications. So we'll see a lot of things like COM objects that other applications may use. There may be plugin models. They want to integrate with things like Microsoft Office and the like. And the 4th is interfacing with data, so things like ODBC and the like. I've spent enough time doing that, and through our training courses, we've kind of gathered enough information that I finally this summer decided to, or last winter I should say, to kind of break that information back out a little bit. And so I wrote a book that came out this summer called the Application Book, and I'll actually be selling some copies over there, out there somewhere later today if you want to grab a copy of that. Otherwise, you go to timmersion.com and get it. The idea of the book is that it's, in essence, a reversal of the Windows API. So for the IT professional, taking a look at all of those things that are getting put down in the system, why are they there? What's the purpose of files in this area or registry settings in there that the installer creates? What's it trying to interface with? So you can better understand the application and better control it. So that's the whole idea. I'll show you how I do that in here in what I kind of call my new art for packaging. And it really starts with 4 steps. Starts with automation. And I'll talk about that a little bit. I use the AppV sequencer as part of the process. It's simply a package, an installer capture process. You could use something else, but I really use this one because of the next piece, which is the analyzer. So I have a free tool called AppV Manage that I provide out of our website, timmersion.com. And this really works on the AppV package to provide you the information about how that application interfaces and what you need to worry about. And increasingly, over time, I'm adding more and more fixes within it so that it produces fixes so you can produce better packages out of that. Now, when we talk about Microsoft AppV, everyone thinks about it as this one big thing, and it's this application virtualization engine, but it's really 2 different things. It's first this packaging part, and then it's this virtualization engine. And one of the things that I'm hoping that we can move towards is, in essence, a single packaging strategy. And I think the AppV format is the best of the formats out there. You know, the MSI was designed when? In the 1990s? And how much has Microsoft done to it since, right? Very, very little. It's not ideal as a delivery method for the enterprise. It's fine for the ISV to get it to you, and you've learned how to manipulate and manage that thing, but it's not the best format in the world. I think the AppV format is terrific, and we can use that to lay things down on systems and run them natively as if you would run that MSI installer instead. And I'm looking forward to doing more of that. So whether you're going to put things in the image, whether you're going to use Configuration Manager to push them out, go through a layering technology, or virtualize them with something like AppV, I think it's the best format that's out there. Okay. I did write an article. I've been doing some writing for TechTarget. They have this e-zine thing, online magazine. And I wrote this article. It really describes what I just said about the AppV format there. So you can always go find that. So let's start talking about automation. And my attitude has changed over the last 4 years. When I have done the packaging in the past and done all of the sequencing with AppV, I've always run the installer through the GUI and then tune that package. And I always felt that that was the best way to understand exactly what I'm getting in there. And I've really kind of changed my attitude on that. Microsoft this year came out with something called the auto sequencer, which allows me, as long as I can have a silent type of installation, I can just concoct up my silent installation, run it through the auto sequencer, and what I find out of this is that it doesn't necessarily speed up the process. Okay, it doesn't take very long to create my AppV package once I got that silent install, but that's really where the bulk of the problem is, and the time spent is getting ready to that point. But once I do it and I turn that crank, it takes between 5 to 7 minutes, well, for most applications, 5 to 7 minutes. Obviously, some applications take longer to install. But one button push, and in about 5 to 7 minutes, I'll have my AppV package. And so I can take a look at it, I can analyze it, I can go back, make some changes and tweaks, press that button again. And what I find as I start doing that more and more is that the quality of the packages I create are far better. And we've been getting really good at producing not only good quality packages that have less of a footprint on the system, that operate in all the ways that applications should, fixing things that the application installer doesn't do for integrations like application capabilities registration that allows the end user to choose which file associations they want and not have it hard-coded by the last installer wins type of thing, and to make them more performant, taking care of some of the things that we see with .NET compilation not happening through that capture process. So this is kind of the quick summary on how I can do it, or how I do it. If you just Google some application name and silent install, that's always a great place to start, you know. Usually end up at one of Bob Kelly's websites, right? It used to be App Deploy, and then it became IT Ninja, and I'm going to remember the name of his new site. App Details, right? Yep, okay. App Details is the new one. There's usually some good information that's out there. I created a PowerShell framework that I threw up on GitHub that I use, and trying to encourage some other people to kind of get involved and help improve the process, because I'm not the best PowerShell person in the world. I'll admit to that. But if you go up there and you just go to GitHub, get silent install, you get that framework. And that's what I use to automate the sequencing involved with the AppV auto sequencer. But once I have it all set, I could use that for any type of installation. So I could take that install script I end up with the application and point that out through Config Manager if I wanted as well. Okay. So I end up using the AppV sequencer, and the AppV sequencer I like as a capture engine, because most of the capture engines will give you some type of exclusion list to avoid things that you really don't want to be capturing as part of that practice. And the AppV sequencer does that as well. But what I love about the AppV sequencer is it gets rid of a whole bunch of background noise through a process exclusion process. So that when I begin the monitoring mode that I'm going to do my capture, it takes a look at the process list of everything that's already running in Windows, and it only captures things on new processes that happen afterwards. So now I start my installer, it's a new process. So I'm only capturing that stuff. And all of the rest of the background stuff that's going on in Windows largely doesn't get put in that capture. So it's a nice clean way to start with. When the sequencer finishes, one of the beauties of the AppV package format is that everything is rendered in an operating system and machine and user neutral format. So anything that would be a hard-coded file path, anything that would be associated with the user's name itself, all of those things get placed as variables inside the package, and when we take that package and put it down on an end system later on, those variables get expanded back out to their normal form. And it allows us a lot of flexibility so that we're only packaging once, no matter how many different operating systems you need to run on. I just love it every time I see my friend Ron Oglesby talk about Unidesk, and now it's called Citrix App Layering, and how it's the simplest process out there. But in fact, what I find in talking to the customers is that, well, yeah, except I have to package it for each operating system separately to create that app layer. So if I need to deploy on Windows 7 32-bit, some 64-bit machines, maybe some Windows 10. Oh, I got to put it on server 2012 R2 for my Citrix farm. And oh yeah, we're going to 2016. That's a lot of packaging. And with AppV, I'm always just going to do that once. I'm just going to sequence it on that 32-bit Windows 7 machine, and it's going to run on all of those other machines. It's extremely rare that we get any type of OS compatibility issue in that fashion. So then I use this analyzer and take a look at what we get. And we'll do that with some demos here. This is a screenshot of what the analyzer shows us, and it's really breaking things down into the various types of integrations that are out there, as well as are you plugged into Office. And more, I'm capturing more little things that we'll find in here. So in this case, I see a little yellow there indicating that the .NET compilation didn't happen, right? Installer puts .NET components down. It then either will immediately compile them into the native format, or more likely, the installer, because it wants to finish quickly, will put them on the NGen queue and say, hey, compile this for me when the system is idle for a long period of time. And of course, we don't wait that long when we're packaging up. So those things for years have been uncompiled in our AppV packages, and that's kind of one of the things that we've learned. Oh yeah, we really want to make sure that those things get compiled in there so that the application is as performant as possible when it gets deployed to the end system. Just this last week, I added in this stuff in the installer cache files, and this is one that I'm kind of, I'm not real sure about. There's a lot of people who like to clean out the Windows installer cache when they do this type of packaging. They want to remove those things and make the package as small as possible, make sure self-repair never attempts to trigger in, which is a good thing, but occasionally we'll get things like shortcuts that are using an icon that's one of the files in that area, or the fonts are stored in that area, so we can't always clean those out. So I'm getting a little smarter at picking some of those things out, and now we've got this installer fix-up button that creates a PowerShell script that will improve that installation. So you run the installer the way you did, you run this extra script that this thing creates, and it fixes a number of different problems. And I'll be showing some of those here in a minute. Okay. So when we do click that button, it'll actually show us which fixes apply to this particular package, and if you don't want to do that one, like if you don't want to do the installer cache, just leave the stuff in there, you just uncheck that checkbox and then create the PowerShell. Okay. And then when we're done with that, we resequence this. So I'm not doing MSI repackaging. I'm letting the MSI do what it wants to do that capture, and then using this second process that then goes in and this cleans up the things I don't want in that package. And that's the way my scripting is operating. Okay. So let's go look at some stuff. And first thing I want to take a look at is the silent install stuff. So I'm going to bring up VS Code here. If you're doing any type of PowerShell editing, VS Code is a great tool to use. It's free from Microsoft. It makes for a pretty decent editor, not just for PowerShell, but for programming in general. But if you went up to GitHub, let's see if I can just get that cable out of the way. There we go. And you went to the silent install project that's there. You'll get a number of files in here, and then there's an example of using that with the 7-zip program. So as you work with this, there's this silent install utilities PS1, and that's kind of the module with all the back-end logic. You just kind of use that. So you put it in the folder with your copy of this silent install PowerShell script. And let's see if we can make things a little bigger for you. No, that's not where my font size is. Now, we're going to live with it the way it is. All right, so we'll have some upfront stuff. But basically, you're going to end up coming up into this area, which is your main editing area. And so we've got some hashes that are set up for you that you simply add in what's the installer. So you put in whatever the EXE or the MSI is, the command line arguments for it. And that's going to handle EXEs, MSIs, CMDs, BATs. You can put a zip file in there, and then the argument is just a directory to unzip that to. So all various types of installation things that you would do, and just add new ones in there. You might notice I've got both an x86 and an x64 variable that are separate there. And so in my lab, I set this up so that I can sequence on a 32-bit machine or a 64-bit machine. There might be different installers involved. And I can just use this one script, and it'll just figure out, oh, what machine am I on, and use the right set of variables. Okay. Once I've done that, I may have some files that I want copied. So I may have some individual files. So I have a separate variable where you would put those in. Again, also 32, 64-bit. Many times the installers will put in shortcuts, like they put in a shortcut to the manual file or to a shortcut on the desktop, and the installer may not give me an opportunity to put a command line argument to have that not happen. So fine, you just put in the name of the shortcut there, and it'll figure out where it is and just remove it afterwards, right? So let the install happen and then do that cleanup. What is this? That's another example here. Here's some environment variables. So when I use the auto sequencer works on Windows 10 only. And OneDrive just loves to create this environment variable after logging in, and it gets captured in my packages. So fine. So I just put in the name there and delete that when I'm done. I may have services that I want disabled. I do that quite a bit. The service is something like an auto updater. I want to defeat the auto updater. So I'll just put in the service name here, and it'll find that and disable that service for me. Okay. There we go. Oh, I got to use the mouse on this, right? Okay. This line here actually, excuse me, runs all of the things from the variables you set above. So it's going to go in, it's going to run those installers, do the copy files, take care of the shortcuts, the services, on all of those things. In addition, it will look for additional files in the same folder. So it'll look for .reg files. Okay, so if there's a file in that folder called .end with .reg, it's going to run it. Now, I also put in a thing, so if the file name is underscore x64.reg or underscore x86.reg, it'll only run the reg file if it's on the right version of the operating system. So, right, so you can have that type of control, because maybe it's a 32-bit app, so you're hitting different parts of the registry. See, we got the reg, and then we have the script that I'm creating out of my analyzer to do the additional fix-ups. And those things are just kind of picked up automatically. So I just have my silent install utilities file over there, the silent install that I've edited here, the installer files, and then any of these extra reg files or the PowerShell for the automated fix-up. Just put them in the same folder, point my auto sequencer at that, and then boom, it just runs that whole thing and creates the AppV package for me. If there are some more things I need to do, I provided a second area down here for editing that you can do that. Sometimes I have an application I want to package, it doesn't have an installer, so I need to create a shortcut. So we've got the ability to just create a new shortcut that's in there. Maybe I want to create an extra registry key. I didn't want to just create a reg file. Just put in the entry right in there, and I can run that. So here's an example here of 7-zip. Let me bring that one up. Okay, so we got our basics. And my example with 7-zip actually did not change, really. Okay. This isn't my actual example with 7-zip, apparently, because I don't have the installer name in there. But 7-zip is one that you would use a /s to do the silent install. And that was really all we did, because it's actually a pretty reasonable. That's a terrible copy. We're not going to look at that. Let's go find a better copy. There we go. So we have our two different versions of the installers that are in that area there. Excuse me. And there were some files here I wanted to remove, so I actually was removing the uninstaller here because it didn't put it into the Windows installer cache. It actually dropped the uninstaller into the 7-zip directory it created. There's my environment variable. That's commented out. And did I do anything down there? No, I didn't. Okay, so it's a pretty simple package in the end. I'm pretty much just running that installer. All right. So that's the silent install portion. Let me cancel that. That's my problem. Let's go take a look at some packages now. And I want to go to A. Okay. So I have a number of different packages up there. So this is the AppV Manage tool, and for a large part, folks have been using this for a number of years for their AppV5 packaging. So after they finish the sequencer, they come to this tool on a machine with the AppV client and run it against the package, and so you don't have to worry about any server infrastructure or anything like that. It'll just find the packages, you can bring them in, add them and publish them into the AppV client, and do your testing, and has some nice debug capabilities here in the debug tab to help you understand what's going on in that package when something doesn't work right. But the analyzer is the thing I wanted to show you here. And I'm going to start with the 7-zip package. I'll show you kind of the full thing of the way that I'm doing this process. So I've set up my silent install. I ran the auto sequencer, created my package, and I come in, find my package, and click that button. And it does a number of things. It first adds the package into the AppV client using the PowerShell behind the scenes. It then published it. It then ran an AV scan, because one of the weird things that ends up happening with AppV is that when you do the sequencing, we don't run active antivirus on that machine. So you could actually get something in your package, which is now in a compressed format that's not ending in .zip. And when you copy that up to your server, there's a very good chance your server is just going to say, oh, that's just fine. I'm not going to look inside that file. And you can now bring that down to the client. If you remember when Paula was up here, she was showing that FLT mod, and we saw a bunch of filter drivers that were showing on that screen. Well, the way that AppV ends up working and antivirus ends up working, I can bring that package in, mount it down to my system, and that antivirus doesn't actually see it because it comes at a level of the filter drivers below the antivirus stuff, and it can get down to my system. Now, when I try to use that, if I start opening up and reading the file that has that virus in, the antivirus will kick in and they'll detect it then. But I wanted to capture things as fast as possible because we always end up having this argument with the CSO when they hear that we're not doing the antivirus on our sequencing machine, they get all freaked out, right? And they say, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, and someone has to find the thing where Microsoft says, yes, we have to turn this off. So we tried to make this easy. You finish your package up, you just drop it up on the share, you bring it in the tool. After it adds it in, it'll use your local antivirus here and do a quick scan of the AppV package itself, assuming your antivirus supports that feature. If not, it'll have to do a whole disk scan. So once it's done that, it brings up the analyzer, which we can see that came up here. So this is my initial version of the 7-zip, right? So I've just ran the install, and let's see what we can find in here. And we can see that there's an application, which is nice. I don't have the yellow here, which is really nice. If the application had anything that would require elevation in it, in any of the executables in terms of inside their manifest files or UI access, that we would have seen a little yellow indicator there, just to highlight that, hey, you might want to look at this and try to figure out, is this going to be a problem for you? But this was a nice clean app in that fashion. We only had a single shortcut, so that looks fine. It's not on the desktop. We can see a whole bunch of things here under the file associations. So there's 35 file associations for 7-zip. And one of the things that I see here right away is the fact that each of these file associations is taking ownership. So this is one of those last right wins. If I drop in 7-zip and I drop in WinRAR, they want to own these file associations. And it's the fact that they've set themselves as the default under the excuse me, dot whatever extension under the class's root registry, that is why they're taking ownership. And so when I do my new version of the script, one of the things I'll do is I'll actually take that default value out. So I'll let 7-zip install. I'll just remove the default value on all those keys, just set it to nothing, and now it becomes not the default. And when we add in application capabilities, which this app does not support, I see a 0 here, that registration then makes it available to the user to choose. So they can do the right-click, open with, and 7-zip will show up. And they also get that extra piece that says, and make 7-zip my default. So it's up to the user to make that choice, rather than IT making that choice. And I like every one of my packages to support this. And many application vendors don't support application capabilities. And there's a story behind that. So you might recall when Microsoft went from Windows XP to Windows Vista, remember that thing you never used? When they did that, they always had a conference about a year before the OS release for all the developers to say, hey, here's all the new things that we're doing. And that's when application capabilities and app paths were going to be announced to the developers. This was at the PDC in Las Vegas. And unfortunately, before the PDC happened, Microsoft suddenly realized they had this huge security problem, and they dedicated the entire conference to telling developers how to rewrite their code to get rid of all these security vulnerabilities from things that they were doing in the past and all these new APIs they should be using instead. And this stuff got washed under the rug, and nobody really noticed. So there's a lot of vendors that don't include those capabilities, and they really should. And so that's part of what I'm doing as part of my packaging is adding these capabilities in. Because in the end, it's just a bunch of registry stuff, right? And not only is it a bunch of registry stuff, now that you have a tool like this, it's just a click of a button to get that, okay? So whether or not they if there's any file associations in there, we'll get the application capabilities fix here. And now you got a PowerShell script for that particular application that'll give you that capability and take away those last right win scenarios that the installers love to do. Whoop, I didn't mean to close that yet. Well, let's just pick a different one. What the heck? Let's look at ACE. That's a tool that AppV people use here. Very simple app. Oh, I see some yellow over here. It did have application capabilities. It didn't have app paths. So app paths is Microsoft's solution for applications that want to jam in something into the path variable and break everything else on your system, right? App paths is the right way for them to do that. Rather than touch the path variable, they set a registry for their particular executable under HKey Local Machine Software, Microsoft app paths, I believe. And they put their executable name in, and they put a string in there, and ultimately that just kind of gets prepended to the path variable just for that application. So their folders with their special versions of the DLLs will get found first, but only for their app. And that's what they're really supposed to do. But the other thing App Paths does is it helps with Windows search. So particularly as users go beyond Windows 7, they all come in here and start typing, right? And so I can say CONTR, and immediately it knows control panel. I don't have to put the whole thing in. And that's because the control panel applet is registered with an app path. And that's how Windows search works. So for anything we're packaging, we want those things in to make it easier for the users to get the application to run. Okay. The other thing that I noticed here is I noticed some yellow over here with the .NET. And if I open this up further, what this is telling me is that there are some files in here that didn't get compiled for .NET. So what that means is that on the end target system, every time the user launches that application, that stuff is getting compiled in memory instead into the native format and run, and then thrown away. So I want that captured as part of my packaging and laying that down. Now originally, the .NET native format was not portable between different processors. And so we always avoided this for the longest time. We wanted that compilation to happen on the target end system to be sure it was compiled right. But that has changed over the years, and Microsoft didn't really make much noise to it. I had to dig into Redmond and find the right developers to find out if this was really okay, and it turns out it is, as long as we stay within the same architecture. But what they mean by architecture, they mean anything that's Intel, x86, x64, AMD, Intel, whatever. That all is one architecture. When they say architecture, they're saying, oh, you can't take that and go to ARM. Okay, fine. I'm not going to take my Windows applications and go to ARM. I'm not worried about that. So we can do this compilation as part of our packaging and deliver it out. And in fact, if you take a look at what Microsoft is doing with UWP, those things actually do a full chain compilation inside the UWP package. So Microsoft is doing the native compilation themselves as part of the packaging effort and delivering that to whatever processor. So today we really know that this is fine to do. Okay. So in this case, I would just bring this up, and we should see there's 3 different fixes available on that package. One for the app paths. There are a bunch of files there in the installer cache, so maybe I want to clean those out. And then the .NET compilations, and that would be included in the script. Let's look at, Blender's boring. Let's look at Box. Box is an interesting app. It wants to do lots of things for us here. Got some yellow here with the VC runtimes, so I kind of have to talk about that with AppV. So there are some VC runtimes that if we capture them inside our package, they don't work with AppV. And it's basically the 2005 to 2008 series. The stuff older than that, the stuff newer than that, it's fine. So what AppV will do is it'll capture this stuff, and as part of putting the package down, the AppV client will take those things and natively deploy them. And that's okay, except that these are versions that the installer put down that have known security flaws to them. And so they're getting added back on those client systems. And we kind of figured that out. We said, oh, you know, if I'm a company that's really worried about security, I don't want this happening. And so we want to make sure that we get these things out of our package, we treat them as dependencies, and we keep our client systems patched with the correct versions instead of having them in our package. So we are calling these things out here and just letting you know, hey, whoop, you might need to worry about that. And sometimes, so what I'll do is on the sequencer, is I'll put all the .NET versions down. And when I do that, I usually install them in reverse order so that I get the really bad ones there. If you install them in the front order, the security fixes, like 2008 SP1 security update for MFC, it actively looks for the older version and deletes it. So if you do them in a reverse order, then all of the bits are down there. And now when I run the installer, I'm less likely to get any VC runtimes in my package. But I will get them in there. Because sometimes the installer will look and say, well, that's not quite the version I wanted, so I'm going to drop my own version down anyway. So then we have to go play cleanup, right? And that's where these cleanup scripts can then come into play. What else? Doesn't this one have a driver? Yes. Run keys, yeah. This one has some run keys. This is something else I've added in the last couple weeks now. So the run keys are set for executing at boot time. And if we're actually going to use this package as an AppV, that key is ineffective. So we want to highlight that and make sure you're aware of it. Most of the time, those things are things that we don't want anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. All right. Adobe Reader had some group policies. So I do need to talk about that because we just recently learned or recognized when we capture group policy settings in our AppV package, with AppV 4, those policies were ineffective, and the AppV client blocked them from being part of your package. And so that way, any policies that you put out through your normal group policy mechanism that went outside the virtual environment took effect. Well, it turns out in AppV 5, they changed that, and they didn't tell us. And now when we're capturing these things, what's in your package wins. And sometimes that's a good thing, but you need to be aware of that and get those things cleaned out if you didn't want them in there. Was that a question? Oh, no, just a, okay. All right, who had a driver? Oh, Snagit, that's a good one. So TechSmith came to me before, I think it was version 13 of Snagit. They decided they really wanted to support customers that were deploying their software through AppV, so they wanted to have a nice recipe up there, and they were struggling getting one going. So they brought me in to take a look at that, and we found some interesting things, and that's kind of what shows up in here. There's this thing called UI access, and UI access is something that I totally ignored for years and years until we had this problem. So inside the manifest file of that particular executable, in addition to the lines that say like run as administrator, they've got this other thing that says UI access, and it's usually off. What UI access does is it provides kind of a minimal form of elevation for that executable. So for the purpose of it is that the executable running at standard user mode, if it wants to be able to access the full desktop screen, which think about something like Snagit, it needs access to the area of the screen outside of the application itself. Well, it needs extra permission to do that. And so that's what this UI access does. In terms of elevation, if going from standard user to administrator through an elevation raises your SID level by 1,000 hex, UI access is raising you up a security level of like 10. Just enough privileges to be able to allow to do that. Well, for an application to get the UI access to go without a elevation prompt from UAC, that executable has to be in what Microsoft calls a well-known location, which they didn't actually define. All the documentation just says a well-known location. So we had to find out from the developers at Microsoft what exactly does that mean. And it turns out it means that it's in the Windows folder or it's in the program files or programs x86 folder only. And of course, AppV puts its cache somewhere else. So when they sequenced it and they tried to run the package, they kept getting this stupid UAC prompt, and they couldn't figure out why. Well, it turned out it was this UI access, and so we did originally some tweaks to the script that we used to install the software to fix the problem, so that it would actually start this particular component inside the virtual environment, so we would reference it using the program x86 folder. But then they fixed their product by the time version 13 came out to avoid this problem completely, which was really nice. So I always try to keep an eye out for those things. This thing also has a couple of device drivers in there. Turns out in the case of Snagit, these are things for features that nobody really uses. They have like 2 or 3 customers, I think, that use the feature. It has to do with the cloud and syncing stuff and stuff like that. So we don't need that stuff, right? Nobody uses the cloud anymore, right? Isn't that 2016? Let's see, and we had a service here, which was part of their uploader service going up, and you may or may not want that in there. So that allowed the end user to, after they finished doing their capture, they could sync it up to Sharecast or whatever they call their cloud service, right? Which might be something you want to block, right? So that would be a case where you just disable that service. Citrix Receiver was a fun one too. There we go. Because it has a device driver that shows up here. It's a little bigger package, so it takes a little longer. Oh, we got some red. Always love red. Red must be really important, huh? Yeah. Let's see. So, right. So these are the ones that are incompatible with AppV, which means the AppV client with this package would have actually put those components down. Now, fortunately, these were the latest of the 2008 branch, so these don't have any security flaws today, but they might in the future. So I really, in many companies, I don't want this happening in my package, so I'd keep that out. But if we went back up here, we see a device driver in here. That device driver is associated with USB functionality. So if I had something like a small scanner that I plug into my USB port on the client, Citrix would remote the USB port, in essence, to the Zen app or Zen desktop session that they're running in to look like a local device. And it's that device driver that makes that happen. So if I were to deliver this through AppV, then I wouldn't have that functionality, right? So that would be a case where I could take the package maybe and expand it down on the system as a native install or just deploy it through a regular native install. All right. So let's get to the fun stuff that you shouldn't do at home. let me go back here. All right. Okay. It's got this one slide. I'm going to tell you, don't do this at home. Okay? I'm telling you right now, I'm going to show it to you. I think it's kind of interesting, but not recommended best practice. So I'm going to go to a Windows 7 machine. Here we go. So I've had my auto sequencer set up. When I run the auto sequencer, let's see if I slide you. I'll show you how I run the auto sequencer. So the auto sequencer works with Hyper-V, and only works with Hyper-V. And basically, in the end, it's a bunch of PowerShell. I mean, that's all it really is, to automate the process of getting all this stuff running. And so you get the auto sequencer through the Windows ADK, you download it on your Hyper-V system, you get some PowerShell. You then go over to my blog site at timmersion.com, and I've got a blog page that shows you all of the things that you need to change in the PowerShell they give you because it's awful. I'm trying to work with Microsoft to get them to open source that PowerShell so that I could just post the fixes. But unfortunately, you know, the ADK has a little EULA that you click through that says I can't post their stuff up there, even if I fixed it. So all I can do is give you the fixes. So I've got line by line, here's what you do to fix it, to make things work. Like the auto sequencer won't let you run an installer that's just a PowerShell script. And of course, what am I doing? I'm trying to do everything with PowerShell. So you know, that's one of the things that I want to fix in there. But you install that, and basically you end up with an XML file. And I'm not going to show you it as an XML file. I'm going to show you it with a tool I haven't yet released. I'm thinking about it. That just I use in my lab. Here we go, installers, automation, and setups. And so these are the XML files that I have. And then I had this little tool that just allows me to quickly edit and make the kind of changes I want and just run the sequencer from there. So here's my optimized version here. So I've got, I think currently about 55 different packages that are in here, right? And so I would just come in here, and if I want to do them all, I would just say enable all. In this case, I've got just one set here. And I would just say, okay, I just want this one package done. Fine. Go ahead, run the auto sequencer. And it'll start that whole process up. So it's going to go to the VM that I've got on this machine. It's going to revert it. It's going to start it up. It's going to take the files that I referenced, get this out of here, in here. And there's two sets of files in there. There's one set for dependencies and one to do the installation. So the dependencies are going to run before the AppV sequencer. And then it'll start up the sequencer, and it'll run the silent install. I shouldn't be getting that prompt. That doesn't look good for a demo. So it'll start up the sequencer and just create that package for me. Okay? So I'm just going to minimize that. It's going to take about 5 minutes to run. But that's the process, right? I get my scripting set. I just come in, tell it where the things are, and it goes, it does its thing. When it's done, I'll have a package that's updated up on the server share for that package. But let me go to the thing you don't do at home. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. We can see it working there. Okay. So I wanted to go to my Windows 7 machine here. So here I've gotten all of the packages that I created. And I've brought them all in on this machine. And I can come over and just start launching some things. What do we have? That's got to be the wrong start menu. Oh, I know what I did. I zoomed it so you could see the text. That was a bad idea. This is Windows 7. All right, so if I came in here, I've got a whole bunch of packages. Oh, let's just run Mozilla Thunderbird. Really? Let's try a different one. How about paint.net? Okay. Okay, we're not going to do that demo. Damn it. Well, just for the record, I did leave my servers on stage all morning with Paula here, so all bets are off.
They're not your servers.
Not my servers anymore. What this should have shown you, though, is that all 54 of those applications, which were sequenced on Windows 10, actually work. Trust me, they work. They actually work on Windows 7. Right? In the past, we've never been able to go that way. The AppV client itself prevented us from going backwards on the operating systems like that. And the best practice has always been sequence on the older OS and move to the newer. But it actually turns out as we start doing this stuff, those restrictions got taken out. As long as I'm in the same formatting version of the AppV client, I can go backwards to Windows 7. And it actually works, which surprised the heck out of me. I knew the app compat was good with AppV, but I had no idea it was that good. So that was very surprising, and I'm going to continue playing with that going forward. What am I doing? I didn't see the 5-minute sign. Oh, yeah, there it is. Yep. Yeah, he's not even doing the sign, so he's saying, yeah. Okay. So I do have a couple of minutes. I'm going to take it anyway. And I wanted to give folks an opportunity to ask any questions, either about the stuff I've talked about here or AppV. Yeah, in the back. Okay. The question was, can I sequence on the 64-bit OS and go to the 32-bit OS? The sequencer prevents us from trying to do that. However, everything I know about the AppV format, I bet it would work if I could. You know? And eventually I may get around to the point of maybe tweaking an AppV file and faking it out and just see what happens, because I'm kind of interested in that idea. But the client will not allow you to go in that direction today. Okay? And so for that, great question, I'm going to give you a book. Okay, so come on up and see me afterwards. All right, I got time for one more question. Now that you know there's a book involved.
I had a question. Why is it? Because Softricity already started a long time ago. Why are the vendors not making applications yet? Because everybody's doing the same work.
Yeah. So the question is why after all this time, all right? I mean, Softricity, we built the first version in 2001, 2002 is maybe the actual release date. And you know, why don't they support AppV? We thought on day one that we would have that happen. And we tried to reach out to them, and they just plain weren't interested. Come by and I'll sign it too, because I forgot to do that. To date, there's been very few vendors to do that. Quite frankly, I don't think I want the vendors creating the AppV package for you to download as a format instead of the MSI. Because you're going to want to customize that thing no matter what. So what I would love, and we've seen a couple of vendors do that. So Adobe did it with their Adobe Reader. TechSmith has done it now. I think Attachmate did it at one point. I think they've pulled that back. They're providing the information in terms of kind of the recipe of how to do the application. But more importantly, they're providing support. So if you call in to those companies with those products and say, hey, I'm having a problem with AppV, support isn't going to hang up the phone on you, right? And that's what we really want. We want them to support it. It's kind of like Citrix. You know, for years, you know, if you're going to call into the vendor, you didn't say anything about Citrix unless you really had to, because they're going to ask you, and you'd have to go and reproduce it on a system without Citrix running to be able to get their support. And that's kind of the mode we're in with AppV. We started to see some movement within the last year and a half. And I think that movement happened because the vendors were starting to play with Centennial with an idea of they could use that, and they wanted to support that. And of course, not too many vendors are actually doing Centennial when they figured out they couldn't actually use it for the applications they wanted to. right? Because there are some severe restrictions in there. You can't have any COM objects, you can't have any services and things like that. So they actually, that's when we started seeing a little more interest from vendors to do things with AppV. So I've mentioned a couple companies. There are a couple of others that have reached out to me, but they haven't really gone public at this point. And that's kind of where we're at. Right? So, all right, so I'll be here all week. I guess I am doing a book signing later on, so we'll have some additional copies since you didn't get a chance to ask the question. If you want to put down €30, we'll give you a book and we'll sign it and do all of that stuff. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the show.